Picture it. You have just walked in the room, and the meeting planner comes running over to you and says, "Thank goodness you're here. Our speaker didn't show up, and you're on." And some of you are like, "I've had that happen to me." Do you guess that what you say and how you say it to that audience will be important? You better believe it. So whether you've had days, weeks, months to prepare, or moments, you've got to be on every time. What we're going to do for the next 90 minutes is focus on how do you speak like a pro every time. Now, first, let me tell you what this is not. This is not a basic how to give a presentation. I know if you're here in this room, you already know the basics of giving a presentation. You know that you're supposed to tell us what you're going to tell us, and then tell us, and then tell us what you told us. You know all those basics. Many of you probably have been through Toastmasters. Many of you have probably been speaking a long time. I'm skipping those basics because I know you know them. I'm moving on to the things that over the course of years I have learned from watching masters and from trying to see what works and what doesn't. And so that's going to be our focus. These are going to be the tips and the tools that the greats use to be effective. As I said earlier, not everyone will work for you, but many of them will. And I challenge you to think about what could I do differently based on what I'm learning in this segment. I do not doubt that every single one of you could come up here right now and do an outstanding presentation on presentation skills. I don't doubt it, because every time I've seen one, I learned something. I just want to see if you can learn something new today. I know that every time I deliver this program, I learn something new. And with that, let's talk about which is more important as a speaker. Being competent, so being a good speaker, or being confident. Which is more important? So I'm hearing a couple of people say competence, and most saying confidence. Why confidence? Yeah, he said if you're not confident, people can't believe your message. In our experience, competent speakers who are not confident aren't believable. Confident speakers who are not competent get more competent because they believe they can do it. And so the first cornerstone of what we're going to discuss today is how do you build confidence? Now, unlike Chris and that really cool slideshow that she had, mine is extremely basic, intentionally. Because unlike many of you, I've shown up to places to give a speech, and the AV did not work. And I have learned, both from doing a program where I must have AV, because there's no way to do it without it, and programs where I'm in a setting where it might not work, that I try to do something that is simple, that if it's not there, I can still go. And so all you're going to see on the screen is what you have on your paper, with one exception, and I'll point that out when I get there. It's all there. So your handout is your crib sheet for taking notes. So why do you think it is that people get so nervous before they speak? One of the things that we've noticed over the course of time is they've done a lot of studies. And although this may not be as true outside of the US, in the US, when they ask people, what is something you fear? Typically, they get two answers: public speaking and death, in that order. So people would rather be dead than get up in front of a group of people to speak. To take it one step further, what we're saying is we'd rather be in the coffin than giving the eulogy. First of all, I know you're all speakers, so only about a third of you would agree with that. But for many of us, there is some fear. I've been speaking, well, if I'm being honest, I've been speaking for about 53 years because my first words came really quickly after coming out of the womb. I love to speak. I still get nervous. And I am fearful of the day that I don't get nervous. Why? Because I fear that if I don't get nervous, it means I don't care. What are some things that you do to build your confidence and to reduce your stress? What are some things you do? Practice. This is huge. In fact, I'm going to give you the 6 steps to being awesome every time you deliver. You ready? Prepare, prepare, prepare. Wait for it. Practice, practice, practice. This coming from someone who has sung at Carnegie Hall. I know, it takes practice. Some of you are thinking, that was just one of those drop-ins to make me sound better than I really am. You've got to always be prepared. Even if it's the scenario I set up at the beginning where somebody just says you're on. You have been preparing your entire life. You've got to prepare and you've got to practice. There are some of you in this room that could never not practice. And there are some of you, and I know you because I was you, who say, I don't practice because then I'm not fresh. You have to practice. That doesn't mean you have to memorize. You have to practice so that when you then go deliver, it's not the first time you're doing it. Years and years ago, when I was a student at Penn State, one of the things that I got to do was deliver study skills workshops. And we used to tell the students, find out early on where your final exam is going to be, and make sure you study in the space where your exam is going to be. Because if you went to a large school, you know that the final exam was never in the room where you actually had all your lectures and labs. It's some other place. And what we discovered was that when people studied in the space where they would then take the exam, they did better. It's the same for you. What do you all think I did the first thing right after walking in this room this morning? I got up on this stage and I gave my opening line. Because that way, when I then got up to give my opening line to you, it wasn't new. It was fresh, but it wasn't new. I had done it before. I very often don't know where I'm going to go after my opening line because that's a skill that I have. I can just kind of go, but I always know how I'm going to open. And I've rehearsed it at least once or twice so that it's fresh. You're creating muscle memory around it. So prepare and practice. What else can you do to kind of build up your confidence and reduce some of the stress? Yeah. Yeah, you can have a ritual. If you've ever studied athletes, most very successful athletes have rituals. In fact, some of them have really silly rituals. I was watching an interview the other day with a baseball player who said that throughout his entire coaching career, he wore the same socks no matter what. And if he lost a game, he then washed the socks. 10 wins in a row, you've got some nasty socks going on. But that was part of his ritual. Whatever your ritual is, it becomes part of your foundation and grounding. Great, ritual. What else can you do? Yeah. Visualize. I'm a huge fan of visualizing things. There are 2 different things you can visualize. One, you can visualize that you've just completed your speech and the audience jumps to their feet with applause. Some of you were like, I'm liking that. I like that picture. Or you could visualize the adult beverage that you've earned after you finished the speech. By the way, not before, but after. And there's a reason for that. I've known people go, I'm just gonna have a couple of drinks and then I can go do my, no. You wanna be sharp for the speech. In fact, I highly recommend a lot of drinking 24 hours before, but water. You need to be hydrating early on. There is science that will tell you that if you don't start hydrating at least 24 hours before, the hydration that you need here doesn't get there. So if you wait until minutes before your thing and then you go, okay, I'm gonna go have some water now, it goes right past your throat and into your gut. If you want it here so that you are healthy, you start hydrating the day before. And if that's the case, what do you also have to do right before you go out and speak? Run to the restroom. Because you don't want to worry about that. But what else are you doing when you're in the restroom? Okay, let me ask that differently. What other smart things should you do while you're in the restroom? Calm yourself down. Look in the mirror. Make sure that you look okay. Make sure everything is kind of the way you want it to look. That's really important. And for most of us, if we are a confident speaker, looking at ourselves in the mirror is calming. Now it's kind of interesting when the people behind you go, why is that guy talking to himself? I'm not worried about them right now, unless, of course, they're in my audience. I'm thinking, okay, that was the guy that was just talking to himself, and now he's up on stage. That's probably not good. And by the way, of course, you all know you don't talk to yourself in the restroom with the microphone on, okay? Every longtime speaker has experienced that at some point. So just be aware of that. What else can you do to alleviate some of the stress? Yeah.
Show up early.
Show up early. And when you show up early, there are a number of benefits to that. What are a few of them? You get to meet some people. You get to walk the stage and get a feel for how it is. You know if your AV works or not. And you know, and you have 2 or 3 potential plans for if it doesn't. What else? Sound check. Yeah, so if you were in the room early, you heard what I have learned is a brilliant way to do sound check. The sound engineers are going to do the 1, 2, all those things. And by the way, you're then supposed to, tell them what that all adds up to. But when it's you, when they've asked you to do a sound check, make your sound check something that is valuable to your audience. So what Chris did is when she did her sound check, she said, our program is going to begin in 15 minutes. That was a way for the sound folks to know that they could hear her, but it wasn't a check, check, 1, 2, check, check, which they can do, but as you, the expert, you don't want to be doing that when folks are already in the room. Yeah.
Talk to the people in the audience.
Get to know people in your audience. If you can go and visit with a few folks, there are 2 benefits to that. One is for them and one's for you. What's the one for them? They've gotten to know you. They are starting to feel connected. What's the benefit for you? You have friends in the audience now. It's so nice to have friends in the audience. So in fact, one of the things I've learned to do is at the very beginning of a speech, I will find what I call my nurturer. Now, what do I mean by the nurturer? What is the nurturer doing? They're nodding their head. Now, some nurturers are nodding their head because they're like, wow, I love what he just said. Oh, I'm so on track. And some of them are nodding their head because they're going, you can do this. You got this. I don't care which one I find, but every so often I check in with my nurturer because it's a reinforcement. What else? I saw another hand. Yeah. Yeah. That's correct.
Then I cause all types of audio problems.
You have to know what you're doing in your speech and your highs and lows. Lows as well. Because I have at times done a speech where I'm telling something really, really important. And I don't want to talk in my normal voice, so I need to make sure that you're still going to be able to hear that amazingly important point. Excellent, excellent. Let's hear 3 more. What are some other things you're doing to deal with either the stress or building up your confidence? Feel the mood of the room. Yeah, you can kind of tell how they're doing. Do not freak out if your room is not engaged right away. It probably has nothing to do with you. Now it might, I realize, but it probably doesn't. So get to know your room and kind of match them, but what I call 1+ing them. So take the mood of the room and take it 1 step up. Not 5 steps up. I've been there where I've seen the speaker who only has that level of, oh, let's do it. And the room is like not really ready for that. And what happens when you come too much at an audience? What do? They back away. But what if I invite myself into the audience? What do you then do? You actually lean forward. I learned this as a choral singer. Being in a choir, one of the things our director said is you never can cross the line. Now, in his case, it was the emotional line. If you go too far, if you're singing a song that's really emotional and you get too emotional yourself, the audience starts feeling for you instead of with you, and they back away. But if you step up to the line but don't go over it, the audience comes along for the ride, and they feel something. And when they feel something, what happens? You're connected. And now they want to continue to feel something. Every speaker has to be aware of that line, both audible and content and emotion. That's really important. 2 more ideas for dealing with kind of building up confidence or lowering stress. Yeah. Stop checking your phone at least an hour before, and then do not have it on your person. Mine's over there. It's very possible somebody really important has called me. I don't know. Because right now they are not as important as you are. Now, when we're done, I'll check. Because actually I have a friend who's dealing with her father being very ill. I will check in, but she knows I'm speaking today. So she knows I will check in when I can. Great, 1 more. Find something to laugh at. It's what my grandma Sarah used to call find the funny. There's always some funny someplace. In fact, I am a huge proponent of what I call chuckle lines. What are chuckle lines? What do I mean by a chuckle line? It's an audience smile. It's an audience chuckle. I am not looking for the big guffaws. I am not a comedian. I can be funny, but I'm not looking for the big laugh. Because if you look for the big laugh, what's going to happen? You're going to be frustrated. But the little asides, those little moments where they chuckle or they smile, what happens? They connect with you, but what happens for you? You start to relax a little bit. There's something about laughter and about smiles that actually relaxes an entire room. So let me ask you about notes. Should you have notes? Totally depends. There are some speakers that would never be caught dead on the platform with notes. I am not one of those speakers. I always have notes. Now you have a handout. I have your handout right here. 1 piece of paper, cardstock. Anyone know why I use cardstock? It doesn't flop around. It looks better. It's like a note card, but big. Your entire handout is right here. If I don't remember where I'm going, I can grab this. And then I've got a couple of little notes about things I want to make sure I remember to say. One of which is, who is most wanting you to be successful when you speak? The audience. See, unlike a comedy club where some people are sitting there going, let's see if he can make me laugh. Audience wants you to be successful. Why is that? They don't want to sit there for an hour and listen to crap, quoting a very intelligent person. Absolutely. So your audience is with you on the journey, and that's a part of how you build up that confidence. Now, when I do this segment about confidence, I don't know what I'm going to talk about because you guys drive it. But that's one of those things I know I want to say, so it's written on my little cheat sheet card here to make sure I catch that in case nobody else brings it up. I always have notes. I don't always look at them, but they're there. What's the value of them being there even if I might not look at them? I know they're there. Have you ever been in a situation where you just totally forgot where you were going? Yeah, it happens. You will, over time, learn to get good at dealing with that, but you also can work your way over to your water, which they think is there for you, and I wouldn't mind a sip, but you're also glancing at your notes. By the way, where else are my notes? Right there. You think that's for you, that's for me. This is how I know where I'm going. Notes, huge. Last thing about building confidence. You will be so much more confident if you are delivering what your audience wants. So this last piece that I call the 4 questions is how do I make sure that what I deliver is on target for my audience? These are what I call the 4 questions. Now, for those of you that grew up in a Jewish household, this is not a Passover Seder 4 questions. This is something very different. Here are the 4 questions. Question number 1, what does my audience already know about my topic? Now, these are not already in your handout, so this is a good spot to take some notes. What does my audience already know about my topic? I'll let you write those, and then I'll continue to go through them. Question number 2, and they'll be on the screen as well. What does my audience need to know about my topic? What does my audience need to know about my topic? Question number 3, this is the big one. What does my audience want to know about my topic? Those are not the same thing. So what does my audience need to know? What does my audience want to know? If you think of these 4 questions as a funnel, you're not allowed to get to question number 4 until you've covered questions number 1, 2, and 3. All of this is before you've ever spoken. Question number 4, what do I want to tell my audience? Where do most speakers start in their preparation? They start at 4. What do I want to tell them? Oh, I'm going to tell them about this, I'm going to tell them about this. Folks, you're wasting your time if you didn't first do questions 1 through 3. Let me show you what that looks like. What does my audience already know about my topic? Let's say that my topic is on how to speak effectively. Let's just say, I'm just pulling one out of the air. What does my audience already know? Well, if you are a group of high school students, you know a lot, you know different things than if you are a group of professional speakers. If I give the same speech to a group of high school students who are in a speech communications class that I give to a group of professional speakers, I'm not doing either group a service. So what do they already know? You have to think about what do they already know, and then there's a corollary to that. What don't they already know? What are the things that I'm going to need to cover to get everybody on the same page? Have you ever been in a meeting where somebody says something in the meeting and you're thinking, what's she talking about? And then you go, well, somebody over there clearly knows what she's talking about. The rest of us are clueless. How does that feel? It doesn't feel good. So you as the speaker have to think about you have to know enough about what your audience knows to begin to prep. Now, what do they need to know? So for a speech on presentation skills, you need to know the mechanics. You need to know how to put a speech together. You need to know the content that you're going to deliver. They need to know all those things that are going to help them be effective, but that's not what they want to know. They don't want to know how to put their notes onto cardstock. They need to know that. What they want to know is the heart stuff. Think of the need to know as the head stuff and the want to know as the heart stuff. They want to know, how is doing what you're suggesting going to impact me? They want to know, how will this have an effect that is positive for me or the people I'm trying to influence? I sometimes like to call this the Reader's Digest version of speaking. Not because you shouldn't give the whole speech, but because very often you will be in a moment where you don't have as much time as you thought. Before you cut, think about the 4 questions. What do they already know? And there are going to be times where you're going to say things like, as many of you know, Cavett Robert was one of the founders of NSA. As many of you also know, an award was named for him. What you probably don't know, now why am I doing that, as many of you know? Why am I saying that? Number 1, I am honoring that some people already know this. Because if you've ever seen a speaker who tells you 5 things and you're like, does he think we're idiots? We know that already. So you're honoring that, but you're also honoring the people that don't know that yet. You're pulling them all in. So if you can always go back to the 4 questions, the reason I put this in the confidence section is when I go to deliver a program, I've done my 4 questions. So I know that I'm going to hit it on target. And here's the best part. When I get off target, I very quickly in my head go back to the 4 questions. All right, what do they already know? What do they need to know? What do they want to know? Okay, here's what I'm going to say. I do it like that. I gave the speech of my lifetime 1 year ago today. It was the Cavett Award speech. It is the only award given on that night that the recipient does not know they're getting it. They don't necessarily even know they've been nominated. They call your name, you go up on stage, and you give a speech. And in going past the 8 seconds of, I don't believe she just said my name, walking up to the stage, I very quickly went through my 4 questions. What do they already know? What do they need to know? What do they want to know? And then I went to some of my tried and true things that I know. I started with the same 2 words, I started this presentation. You want to remember how I started this presentation? Picture it. I know that it's one of my trademark openings. I started my acceptance speech with picture it, because I already knew that I knew how to start that way. The 4 questions keep me on track. Really, really cool. All right. Kind of segueing nicely into, how do you open a presentation? So before I switch over to that slide, I want you to share with me one or two ways you've seen people open that for you were not that effective. What are some wrong ways to open? Thank you for being here. I am so glad. Thank you for having me. It's so good to be here. Did you know it's hot outside? First of all, do we care about any of that? No. Second of all, how many people in this room had any input in me being here today? Why do we say thank you for having me? I don't even get it. Third of all, what are people thinking about before you speak? They're thinking about all the other things that are going on in their life, and they're not thinking about you. When you do the, hi, my name is Gary Rifkin. I'm so happy to be here. Isn't it a beautiful, we don't care. What you want to do instead is you want to start with something that grabs their attention. Now, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. This is the Gary Rifkin pet peeve of all Gary Rifkin pet peeves. Please do not do this. Good morning. I can't hear you. Good morning. Folks, I am not in elementary school. I don't want to play the game, and I certainly do not want to be scolded for not knowing I was supposed to play the game. I don't like it. That doesn't mean you can't engage your audience, but you have to let us know how you're going to engage us. So I apologize now because somebody at some point this week is going to do that. And I apologize as well because you are now all indoctrinated in the Gary Rifkin school of, oh, I'm not just a speaker now, I'm also a critic. That's okay. I always have with me my learning journal. This one happens to be one that we have from our chapter. The front of my learning journal is what am I learning from the speaker. The back of my learning journal is what am I observing the speaker is doing that either, wow, that was awesome, or, oh, did she really just do that? I collect these. The people that you will see all day today have been in the back of my book because I was like, wow, did Lou Heckler just say that? That was amazing. Or, wow, Bruce Weinstein knows how to pull an audience together. That's in the back of my book. There are other people in the back of my book as well. I am always wearing two hats. And if you're going to be a professional speaker and an effective one, you always need to be wearing two hats. Learner hat and observer hat. The only time I don't wear observer hat is when I get so enthralled with the speaker and so enthralled with the learning that I forget to put it on. I will have a hard time with observer hat today because I know these speakers. I know how great they are. Get your observer hat ready because you will learn from every speaker you see, everyone, both the great ones and the not so great ones. You will learn, you'll try things on, you'll see if it fits, you'll put it away. What are some ways that do work for opening a presentation? What's that? Magic, something that wows them in some way. Yeah. What else? I heard ask a question. What's the value of questions? Engagement. What else? You're learning a little bit about your audience. What else? Well, yeah, we'll get to the story in a second, Max. It gets them to start thinking. Chris Clark Epstein is the master at questions. She's created a whole repertoire around why it's important to ask questions. Because questions demand us to think and potentially respond. Here's the trick, though, with questions. If you're going to open with a question, your audience needs to know what they're supposed to do. This is one of the few times when I do recommend using what I call a close-ended question. What's the difference between an open-ended question and a close-ended question? Open-ended questions could have multiple answers, and if you're a group of speakers, they will go on and on. Close-ended questions can really only be answered with one or two words, typically a yes or a no. Here's the way I do it. So let's play along for a minute. How many people in this room have children? How many of you ever were a child? How many still are? Now, what did I just do? I engaged you. What else did I do? I showed you what I wanted you to do. If I don't show you what I want you to do, the high energy people in the room will respond audibly. They'll go, oh, I am. I'm a parent. I have children. Like, that was not what I was looking for, but thank you for playing. So you have to let them know. But what else did I do? I pulled everybody in. If you ask a question and you don't pull everyone in, you lose people. So if you say, how many people in here have children? Well, once I start into the well, what if I just told the rest of the folks, I'm not talking to you anymore? So if I really wanted to do this right, I would say something like, how many people in here have children? How many of you have a child in your life that looks up to you with respect and honor? Well, my nephew Jack looks up to me with respect and honor. So I would go into it that way so that I pull everyone in, because it's pretty likely everybody has some kind of an experience like that. You just have to be careful, because when you do something that pulls people in but not everybody, you are in essence telegraphing to the rest of the people, this isn't about you. So you don't want to do that. Now, Max said the big one. Did anyone hear what Max said to open? Story. I would say that most great speakers, even if they don't always use a story, have a story ready for an opening. Why? What is it about stories? It gets people emotionally involved. It pulls people in. You know, one of the things that we learned as children is that we love stories. I had a public library in my hometown, very small town, and there was a woman named Mrs. Pantley who was the storyteller at the library. She's a librarian at the library, and we would go every week to story hour. And Mrs. Pantley would come in and she'd go, well, let me tell you, the old Pat Peddler came with his big bag of books, and here's the one he picked for you today. And she'd pull it out, and she'd start to read us the book. And I fell in love with stories. It's no surprise that Dr. Seuss continues to be one of the best storytellers on the planet, and a lot of us can still quote many of his stories. Stories are powerful. I love opening with a story. And we're going to spend, in just a few minutes, we're going to spend some time on stories. Now, let me ask you this. Should the first words out of your mouth be your opener, or should they be some greeting of some kind? Opener. You get introduced, or even if you don't, you come out and you start. So how did I start this segment? The Speak Like a Pro segment. Picture it, and then what came next? You have just walked into the room. Well, who's the focus of the story? The audience member. I tried to pull you in right away. Now, what if you didn't know who I was? What if I had not ever been introduced? When do I introduce myself? After the opener. I would do picture it. You have just walked in the room, and oh my gosh, you're on, and what you say or do is going to be important. Well, my name is Gary Rifkin, and I'm going to share with you today some tips and tools. You insert it after the opening, not before. I always open with some kind of attention-getting opening. It should be a trademark, I think, of every speaker. It should be what shows people this is going to be different. This is not going to be the graduation speech where they go, classmates, Mr. Ferris, Dr. DiCaprio, parent. No, we're going to go right in to something that matters to your audience. Activities are a cool way to open. Now, we actually did an activity to open the day. Do you remember what it was? Leo, in his introduction of me, had you stand up and sit down. That was an activity. It was a way to get you engaged. Here's another one I want to try. So stand as you are able, and if you are not able, that's okay. Just kind of sit as high up as you can. But please, everyone stand as you are able. And here's what I'd like you to do. I want you to reach in the air as high as you can, as high as you possibly can. All right, now reach just a little bit higher. Okay, have a seat and readjust anything that got out of whack there. How many of you could not reach higher when I said reach a little higher? Isn't that interesting? One or two of you. I said reach as high as you possibly can, and I repeated it, and you all did that. Then I said, reach a little higher. No, I can't. Reach a little higher. Okay. How were you able to reach higher if you were already reaching as high as you possibly could? You see, we set limitations for ourselves. And in the course of learning, we have to challenge those limitations. We have to reach higher than we think we can. Over the course of this program on computer skills, on blah, I want you to continue to challenge yourself to reach higher. Reach as high as you can. Okay, can you go any higher? No. Are you sure? Okay, a little more. Can you go any higher? No. But there's chocolate up there. Okay. I probably just messed up my mic. You will find that doing an activity, how long did that activity take? 20 seconds, and then the debrief took another 20 seconds. But what I've done is I've gotten people both physically engaged and thinking about something that they are now going to think about for the rest of the session. Something that grabs their attention. Here's the other thing that's cool about an opening. Unlike in business where we hate surprises, in speaking, we love surprises. Because what are surprises for an audience? It's a chance to go out of where they thought you were going to go. Years ago, I got to perform in a show in a community theater called Broadway Bound by Neil Simon. And there was a line, and I played the older of two brothers who were comedy writers. And the brother says to the younger brother, here's the trick to comedy. You have to take people down a path and then veer off to the side. And when you veer off to the side, they laugh. It's the same thing with your opening. If you do something that they're not expecting, which is why magic is a great way to open, because they're not expecting whatever comes out. If you open and grab their attention and do something they're not expecting, they go, wow. Many years ago when I was working at UPS at their information services headquarters, I was teaching a presentation skills class. And we were doing this piece on how do you open a presentation. And so it was this gentleman's turn to do his 1 minute kind of practice session. So he comes up to the front, he goes over to the whiteboard, and he draws a target on the whiteboard. And then he says, I need a volunteer. Elaine, come on up front and help me out. So Elaine comes up front. He goes, here's what I want you to do. I want you to run as fast as you can head first into that target. To which everybody snickered, Elaine cringed, and he said, that's what you do every time you get behind the wheel and don't put on your seatbelt. We're gonna talk about driver safety today. Whoa, here's a topic nobody cares about. And yet we did. We wanted to hear what he was gonna talk about. And I don't mean that nobody cares about it, it's just that's not really where they wanna go in class. So think about a way that you can grab their attention by a little bit of a surprise. An element of surprise makes a huge difference. How many of you would say you're extremely creative? How many of you would say you're somewhat creative? How many of you would say not so creative? How many of you know somebody who is extremely creative? Use them. Go to people and say, I'm stuck. I have to open this presentation. I want something that's gonna really grab their attention. I don't know what to do. Talk it out with people. Figure out what you could do. Here's what you never do. Never, ever, ever tell a joke. Why? Number one, you're probably not as funny as you think you are. Number two, with the internet the way it is today, everyone has already seen your joke. And number three, it is so unbelievably easy to offend people now. I know, because I'm one of those people. I'm easily offended. I'm not easily offended in that I don't have a thick skin. I'm easily offended in that I'm always thinking, how can I be respectful? And I think what happens is when we tell a joke that is at the cost of someone else, we are showing disrespect. Be very aware of your audience, because here's something that happened to me many years ago, not as the speaker, but as a participant. A brilliant speaker named Bruce Wilkinson came to speak to our chapter. And I had known Bruce for a couple of years at that point, and we'd become kind of buddies. And in the middle of his presentation, he was picking on me. And I was loving it, because that, to me, that's the kind of an honor to get picked on by the keynote speaker. And one of the people in the front of the room said, Bruce, don't you like Gary? And Bruce said, it's only because I like Gary. It's only because I know that I can do this with Gary that I do this. But that helped me to know when I can and when I can't. I've known many speakers who've said, oh, I can pick on Leo because we're friends. Yeah, you know that. The other people don't. Does he end up looking bad when I pick on him? No, I do. So be very aware of your jokes. Be very aware of your asides, that you are keeping everybody and not losing people. Anything else about openings? Well, are there other ways that you've opened that you think, wow, this is awesome? Yeah, there and then here. I love we call them startling or surprising statistics. Did you know that 92% of all speakers are scared to death before they go? Now, I just made that up. So by the way, don't make them up. Support them. But great statistics. People do love that. It can't be, did you know that 50% of the population of our organization are females? Like, okay, that makes sense. If it's, did you know that 78% of the women in our organization have not gotten a chance to be in a leadership role? Or something like that. If you do it that way, yes. So those are very powerful. And then, yes, you had one.
So my corporate world, okay, I speak on a very,
And nice and loud because you don't have a microphone.
so in my corporate world, I speak on several policy strategy. And so I'm usually in the middle of a conference. So I actually get everybody up, stand up, and hands over their head and shake your knees. And that like
Yep.
the entire band.
When you are dealing with a heavy topic, you have to let them know it's okay to lighten up, because they may not know that it's okay to lighten up. So that's really powerful. By the way, there are speakers who do this very effectively. I can't, so I don't. I'm not a fan of the turn to your neighbor and say, you look great today. I am a fan of turn to your neighbor and share something you've learned, or turn to your neighbor and share something you've noticed about them. The only reason I don't like the turn to your neighbor and tell them you look great today is, what if you don't feel that way? I want you to be authentic in whatever it is that you're asking people to do. So just be aware of that. It works for some folks. They're very good at it. It doesn't work for everybody. Let's talk about stories. Max and other folks have mentioned stories. What needs to be in a story to make it valuable for a speech? There may need to be some conflict. Yeah, there doesn't always, although one of the things that we've learned is we learn a lot more through conflict and through trouble than we do through the easy. So yeah, what else? There has to be resolution to the conflict. There has to be a learning element to the story. And potentially a build-up to it. And by the way, some of the best stories don't all happen in one spot. I, for years, told stories about my Grandma Sarah. In fact, I had a whole speech called Grandma Says, Feel Good, Do Good, Be Good. Because she used to give us these lectures when we'd get off the phone. Now, Grandma Sarah, let me kind of give you a snapshot. Grandma Sarah is one of those people that just makes you feel great. No matter what you do, no matter what's going on, if you're having a rough day, you call Grandma Sarah. If you're having something great that's happened to you, you call Grandma Sarah. She's that kind of a matriarch. And I can remember being on a call with Grandma Sarah once, and at the end of the call, she would always give us these little lectures. They were like she would call them lectures. They were, save for a rainy day, find the funny. And one day she said to me, feel good, do good, be good. And I'm like, wow, can I quote you? She's like, what are you talking about? I said, I'm gonna write a speech about that. She said, nah, go away. And of course I did. And then afterwards I said to her, Grandma Sarah wrote a speech about what you taught me. She's like, yeah. Well, over the course of the years, I kept telling these Grandma Sarah stories, and people really loved them, because the end of the story would be, who's your Grandma Sarah? Who's the person in your life that makes you feel like you want to be better? Who's the person in your life that you want to feel proud of you? Go and share that with them, thank them, etc. So I'm doing these stories, and about 2004, so 12 years ago, my brother passed away unexpectedly. And he was a couple years older than me. And the first conversation I had with Grandma Sarah was, you need to step up. Jack, who was so close to his father, who is 10 years old, needs a man in his life. And I need you to step up. I'm like, yeah. And over the course of the next number of years, I got to spend a lot of time with Jack. And I spent time going up and visiting him in New York, and he'd come down to Texas to see me. We'd meet together in Florida to see my parents. He became a part of my journey. I didn't have any children, and so Jack became that opportunity for me, and I became that uncle, who was actually the cool uncle, but also every so often was the parent. And his mom would call me and say, Gary, you need to talk to your nephew. And I just knew, okay. All of that, not that I wouldn't have done it anyway, but it was because Grandma Sarah taught me that. So I share that story with you because throughout the course of a presentation, I'll come back to the Grandma Sarah story. I'll weave it throughout, knowing that I'm going to close with part of the Grandma Sarah story. There are times where you can tell part of the story and then come back to it. In fact, one of the best is to open with a part of the story, give a little more of it in the middle of the presentation, and then close with that big close that relates back to the story. Awesome. Let me ask you this. Which comes first, the story or the message? So do you start with a great story and figure out what could that be about? Or do you have a topic and you go, what story could I find for that? Which one comes first? Yeah, the answer is yes. Either one works. Sometimes we start with a story and we go, ooh, this could be something cool. Sometimes we start with a message and we figure out what story could work. So here's one of your big tasks. You are going to start, what I learned from the great Jeannie Robertson, is a story database. The story database are all these little things that have happened to you throughout your lifetime that could potentially at some point be used in a presentation. Now, when I say story, I'm not talking about the time you climbed Mount whatever. Those, you know you're going to tell those stories. I'm talking about the story about the Uber driver who picked you up, and within minutes you discovered that, wow, she's a high school music teacher, and wow, she is 20 years ahead of where Jack is in his journey as a high school music teacher, and how much can I learn from this woman from DFW to my home? And I get out of my door, I'm thinking, I can't believe I only paid $25 for that trip because I got like $1,000 in value out of it. I love that woman. You have loads of those kinds of stories. You just have to start to collect them. I recommend starting a story database. There are some people who do this really well. Every day, they write down 2 or 3 things that happened to them that could someday be a story. You never know. Some of the best stories throughout NSA are stories that started out as a nugget, where somebody landed someplace and said, I got to tell you about this woman on the plane. She was too funny, blah, blah, blah. And then they're done. They think, oh, that was my cocktail hour visit. It turns into a massive, awesome story as long as it has value to the audience. So start to collect your stories. The story database, by the way, you don't have to write out the whole story for the database. You write a couple of things that remind you of the story. That time I ran into somebody on the street wearing a Results Rule t-shirt after I had just been talking to Randy Pennington about his book, Results Rule. Wow, it was so cool to see that on Fifth Avenue. I wish I'd had a camera to take a picture of the t-shirt. Well, I don't know where I'm going to use it, but it's a story, and I'll pop it in someplace. Stories don't have to be 20, 30 minutes long. Some great stories can be 1 or 2 minutes long. So you start to collect your stories. But the other thing is sometimes we start with a story and we figure out what could we do with it. Now there are loads of stories out there, public domain stories, etc. I'm going to share one with you right now. This is one of those stories that's been out and about for years. You may have even heard it before. But I just want you to listen carefully to this story. When Albert Einstein was making the rounds of the speaker circuit, he usually found himself eagerly longing to get back to his laboratory work. One night, as they were driving to yet another rubber chicken dinner, Einstein mentioned to his chauffeur, a man who somewhat resembled Einstein in looks and manner, that he was tired of speech making. I have an idea, boss, his chauffeur said. I've heard you give this speech so many times, I'll bet I could give it for you. Einstein laughed loudly and said, why not? Let's do it. When they arrived at the dinner, Einstein donned the chauffeur's cap and jacket and sat in the back of the room. The chauffeur gave a beautiful rendition of Einstein's speech and even answered a few questions quite expertly. Then a supremely pompous professor asked an extremely esoteric question about antimatter formation, digressing here and there to let everyone in the audience know that he was nobody's fool. Without missing a beat, the chauffeur fixed on the professor with a steely stare and said, sir, the answer to that question is so simple, I will let my chauffeur in the back of the room answer it. At your table, I would like you to share 2 or 3 ways you could use that story in a presentation. You have just 1 minute, go. So let me hear from I want to hear from like just 2 or 3 tables really briefly. Now to speakers, briefly is different than everyone else. So briefly means no more than a 6 to 10 word sentence. That's it. How could you use that story? Who's got one that they'd like to share with us? Stand up really loud. Well, I don't have to worry about you. I know.
The one that we first hit on was don't let them see you sweat.
Don't let them see you sweat. Perfect. Yep. Let's hear another one. Yes.
How to use improv, and the chauffeur was also being authentic.
Yeah, so how to use improv and the chauffeur was being authentic. Yeah. Here, how about 2 more? Yeah. Things are not always as they appear. Yeah, 1 more. Yep. Making assumptions. Yeah. These stories are everywhere. As I said, I don't think this one is true, but they're out there. Here's a critical point about stories. Please stop using the words, this is a true story. When you use the words, this is a true story, do you know what you're actually saying to us? Everything else I told you was not a true story. Every story you tell should be a true story. And if it's not, let your audience know, either by saying, I'm not sure if this happened, but I love this story, or wouldn't it be nice if, or picture this, or hypothetically, or I've heard a story about, then you're okay. But your story should be absolutely truthful. Here's what's cool. Yes, I do. So here's you led me right into the perfect thing. In fact, Chris and I were together in the car once listening to NPR, and they were talking about a show called The Farnsworth Invention, I think it was. And the author said that your stories need to be 100% truthful and at least about 70 to 80% factual. And what I think he meant by that is that the core truth of the story needs to be true. But here's what you're going to learn about trying to keep your stories 100% factual. The minute anyone in your audience was ever in one of your stories, they're going to tell you that, Uncle Gary, that's not how that happened. You do embellish your stories. You add flavor to your stories. Yes, Jack was probably wearing something different than what he was wearing in the story I told about Jack, because it works better this way than it worked the real way. But the essence truth needs to be true. Yeah. Yeah, so the question is there a number of stories either that you need to have or before it gets too many? The answer is no, except 4 questions. What does my audience already know? What do they need to know? What do they want to know? If you've told me 5 stories in the course of a presentation, but I have not gotten what I need to know, then you haven't done your job. Most of the time, the stories help with the want to know part. They help with the connection. And you've led me actually into a perfect transition to, in most presentations, this is more true in training than it is in keynoting, but as Chris said, everything should be a learning experience. There's what we call the SPA technique. The SPA technique is story, point, application. Story, point, application. But you know what's so cool about the SPA technique? It can also be an ASP. Application, story, point. Or it could be a PSA, point, story, application. There will be times where you don't do one of those 3 pieces. If you want adult learning, you probably want all 3 pieces. But there will be times, a lot of keynote speakers will not do application. They will leave it to you to figure out, what do I do with what I just learned? They will probably tell a story and make a point. Tell a story and make a point. Make a point, tell a story. I'm a big fan of the A part of it, as is Chris. That the application, it's the think, feel, do. What do I want my audience to think? What do I want my audience to feel? And what do I want my audience to do? And the do is critical. So the answer to the question is, I don't know how many stories are enough or too many. None is not enough. And all story is probably too much, unless you are Jeannie Robertson, who is the masterful storyteller, who in the course of an hour-long speech can tell 25 stories and make 3 points, but it's really just 1 point, which is really just make sure that you're finding humor. And you will not mind any second of any of that. But she's that good. You have to be that good. Any other thoughts on stories before we move on? Yep. A true story simply told is a blessing. I'm going to share one more thought with you about stories, and it's going to simplify everything. There are only 3 types of stories. Just 3. I'm going to take you all the way back, for some of you, to junior high English, although I actually learned it in French class. Here are the 3 kinds of stories. First-person stories, second-person stories, and third-person stories. That's it. Now you're going, a few of you are going, I get it. And some of you go, what are you talking about? Well, who remembers grammar? What are first-person stories? What do they start with? What words? I, or, what's plural? We. What are second-person stories start with? You. And third-person stories? He, she, the dog, the cab driver, anyone other than me or you. Most stories that we tell on the platform are either first or third-person stories. Most of them are. A lot of people are great at the third-person stories, but not as good at the first. Some are really good at the first, but not as good at the third. You have to get good at both. Most great speakers, really authentic speakers, tell amazing first-person stories without you feeling that, but it was all about him the whole time. If I tell a lot of first-person stories, but I'm not really good at it, I'm not really authentic, you're gonna go, he just talked about himself all day. But if I'm truly authentic and I can connect my first-person story to you, then you're not going to remember that they were all me.
So when you're somebody's mentor, here's another key thing to remember about stories. It is very expensive. Have something happen to you on the way to the speech, and you think, oh, that would be perfect. Or have something that's rolling around inside of you emotionally and say, you know, images is universal. Everybody would be interested in this. That's called doing your therapy from the platform.
Yep.
The other is showing off your life from the platform. Neither of those things are acceptable if you want to call yourself a professional.
That's exactly right. That's right. That's where the 4 questions comes in.
Right. And your own emotional turmoil can't be talked about until you process it yourself. You are not doing the therapy on your own.
Right. You will see some of the, I don't think you'll see any this week, but you'll see those speakers, because you'll be able to tell, because at the end you'll go, she wasn't ready to talk about that yet. For probably about 6 to 8 months, did not talk at all about my brother in my speeches after he died, because I wasn't ready. And then I started to get ready. And then the stories were never about my brother. They were about my grandmother or my nephew, connected through my brother, because I knew I could tell those without getting too emotional. Because remember that emotional, what's that line? If I go over the line, what happens for my audience? You start feeling for me instead of with me. Yeah. That's right. You have to be able to practice the story. Yep. I know some folks that will not tell a story to a paying audience until they've told it at least 30 times.
Also, I
Right.
And then he says, I'm going to tell you a story. And I just killed him because maybe you should just
He just started the story. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And Bruce, I think you had something, yes? I did, but I'm going to tell that story a little bit later. Yeah, you're leading into one of my other stories. So thank you. That was so remember this moment because we will come back to it. Yeah, perfect. So let's move on and let's talk about how do we begin to get our audience more engaged. We've done a lot of it already today in a variety of ways, but there are a lot of ways you can get them engaged. One is audience participation, which is what we've been doing. This is a skill set that if you're going to be doing a lot of speaking to smaller groups, especially breakout sessions, you need to get good at audience participation. If you are only going to keynote and you're only going to keynote to groups of many thousands, the audience participation is probably not going to be with you because you probably can't interact with them. You might. I can't remember a time other than doing a Picha Kucha or what was the other one called, Ignite, those really tight speeches that you have to do as the PowerPoint's rolling. I don't ever do a presentation where I'm not having my audience feed back to me something they're learning or something or a question. For me, that's critical. But I didn't do it well at first. It took time of practice and trying things out to see what worked. But getting your audience involved. What else have we done already today that got you involved? What's that? Oh, the reach a little higher. Yes, exactly. What else? Give away prizes. Yes. What else? The Post-its. What else? Just this actual activity we're doing right now. Right. It's all about audience participation, and it's all part of speaking from a place of it to be about them instead of it's about you. And that's really hard to do. So let's play with another one. This is actually one that I learned, at an NSA event many years ago. I need you to select your team leader at your table. Now, we are going to use a very scientific method for choosing your team leader. On the count of 3, point to your team leader. 1, 2, 3. The table of 2 pointed to each other. Whoever got the most points, you are the team leader. And here's what's great about being a leader. You can delegate if you would like. But I need the team leader to either him or herself or a designee come up and get one of these beautiful hot orange sheets. And Leo, if you'll actually pass those out as they're coming. Come see Leo. He will give you one. You need one per table. And the table of 2, if you want to join a table, that's fine. Or you can play on your own. It's okay. I think I have enough. So here's what's going to happen. Listen carefully to the rules because there are prizes. You are going to have 90 seconds. Listen, these are cool prizes. Trust me, you're going to like it. Well, some of you are. You're going to have 90 seconds to write down something that you have amongst you to represent each of those 26 letters. So, for example, I'm going to give one to this table over here. I see an apple on the table. They're good. They got A done. You have 90 seconds to come up with as many things that you have amongst you to represent the 26 letters. Ready, go. You have 30 more seconds. 15 more seconds. In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Put your pen down. Down, 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 down. Did any group get 20 or more? Ooh, how many did you get? Yeah, count them up, everybody. Count up how many you got. They got 25 of them. How many did you get? 20. How many groups got at least half of them? At least 13 of the 26? Nice. How about 16 of the 26? Okay, pretty good, pretty good. So, bring me your list. I don't know how legible it is, but we're gonna find out. Let's see what they came up with. So they have an apple. I see the apple. They have, I'm so afraid what that is. What's the B? It's a back, right? I'm gonna say it's back. That's what we're gonna go with, because I wasn't sure what I was reading there. Coffee, they have Douglas. Earrings, fun. Oh, is that a smart answer? They have fun, green, humor, intelligence. Yeah, some of you are going, that's not fair. We were supposed to have something on our table. They followed the rules. Jokes, kindness, lanyard, mint, nose, orange paper. Anyone get orange paper for O? Very smart. Phone, questions, round, sweets, Tammy, pseudonym, no. Oh, upside down. How did I get pseudonym out of that? Vitality, water, they did not get an X. Did anyone get an X? Excitement. You can work it anyway. Yellow and zipper. So here, you can have that back. So let me ask, what happened in the room during those 90 seconds? And by the way, it was less than 90 seconds intentionally. The energy went way up. What else? Everybody participated. What else? There was a little bit of competition, which some people love. By the way, there were prizes. So let's see what the prizes are. So this table gets their choice of Butterfingers, which, by the way, I found out are gluten-free in case we need that. We have Twix, Reese's, these are awesome. Of course, Milky Way, and Snickers. And then for those who don't like chocolate, I don't know who you are, Werther's Originals, which, by the way, when you have a sore throat, these are great before you speak because they coat. Just a little side note that I learned. Not great before you're gonna sing, but they're, and then because of who you are, had to have some Smarties. So you get to pick which one you want. They want this, I'm sorry, your leader chose. Smarties it is. The rest of the groups that got at least 16 or more, you can come up and pick one, send a red designee up to pick one. And while you're doing that quietly, whoops, which one? Snickers, Reese's, Twix, Butterfinger, Milky Way, Twix. Milky Way, Butterfinger, oh, there we go. No, I don't need it, and there's the last one, good. So, let's talk about what we just did. Everything that we just did was intentional except for the visiting going around with the chocolates. Hello. So in that 90 seconds, I ran out. You'll have to borrow from another table. There's extra Smarties. Everything in that 90 seconds was intentional, as was everything after the 90 seconds. So what were some things that we did that were valuable in terms of a group having some interaction? Candy, we love candy. What else? It let down your barriers a little bit. That's right, it gave you a chance to kind of feel more comfortable interacting. What else? You got to know a little bit about how each other thought. Yeah, I always have some prizes for things like this. I have found that no matter how cool the prize is, if I don't have some candy, I'm missing something. People do love the candy. I always have some candy that does not have chocolate, and I try to have something that I can have a little fun with, whether it's the Smarties or I intentionally bought the Werther's because that was a way for me to remember that little tip I'd gotten years ago that, hey, Werther's on a last minute moment kind of coats a little bit. So all of those things are to get people engaged. There are a whole bunch of resources that you can get for finding these kinds of icebreakers, these little activities. Just make sure you tie the activity into whatever it is you're doing. You could use an activity like this because you are then going to brainstorm around something really important for the organization, and it gets people's minds opening up. There are two resources I will recommend. The first, and I don't have this on the slide, is a book by the name of Izzy Gazelle. And the book is called Playing Along. Izzy is a master at improv, and he has improv games that you can do with teams. IZZY, Gazelle, I think it's Gesell. He is an NSA member, brilliant. Some of you, if any of you went to the winter conference, he did a breakout session there that got rave reviews. The second, yes? Oh, the book is called Playing Along. Outstanding. The other one that I will recommend is any in the series of the books that are called Games Trainers Play, and there are other books just like it by Ed Scannell. In fact, we've got a few of them in the back of the room, so whoever chooses the next thing could actually get one of Ed's books. Ed is not only a brilliant trainer, he is a past president of both what used to be ASTD is now ATD, and NSA. I believe he's one of the only that has ever been president of both organizations. Scannell, Scannell. Just amazing. And he's got a whole series of those. But find some ways to get people having some fun. Now I want you to pair up with somebody nearby, what we like to call geographically convenient. So somebody at your table or at the next table, but I really want you to just have one partner, not two, because otherwise we won't be able to finish the activity. So really quickly find one partner at your table or next to your table. You all right? All right, here's what I'd like you to do with your partner. I would like you to share one or two things that you learned during the Speak Like a Pro segment that you believe you will try the next time you are going to give us a presentation. One or two each. I'm really just going to give you about 60 to 90 seconds to visit, so do it really quickly with your partner. Ready, go. Make sure you're starting to wrap up. We got about another 20 seconds. So what's the value of doing partner activities? You get a new perspective on some things, yeah. What else? What are some other values of doing these one-on-one partner activities? It reinforces what you've learned. Yeah, there's loads of ways you can do this. I particularly use that one because what it does is it leads me into how do you begin to review what you learned. So we've actually segued into the action-oriented close. So what were some of the things that you shared with your partner or that your partner shared with you? What were some things that you're gonna do? Yeah. The candy, yeah. I gotta tell you something. It never cost me more than about 20 bucks, and wow, is it worth it. So yep, what else? The exercise, doing some kind of an exercise, yeah. What else? Yeah. The 4 questions, yeah. What else? I wanna hear 10 more really quickly, yeah. Yeah, telling your audience what you want them to do in your opening and what you want them to gain. Yeah, what else? What's that? The spa technique, story point application. Yeah. Intentionally collecting stories. Yeah, what else? Opening with a statistic, a startling statistic, or a quote, which we didn't mention, and quotes are an awesome way to open. I will give you a little caveat on that. Always, if you're gonna use a quote, make sure you're using a quote of somebody that is not charged. What I mean by that is you don't use a quote of a highly political figure. You have to be really careful, because once you use the quote of the person who's in the news, you lose a third to a half of your audience who don't like that person. That's why Chris uses, as she calls it, the white dead guy quotes, because they've been gone a long time, so it's okay. And if you're gonna use quotes, mix it up. So I will very often use a Maya Angelou quote because she was my all-time favorite speaker and because I met her a few times. Use quotes from people that really have resonated for you. Yep, 3 more. Yep, Rob. Picture it. Yep, 2 more. Yep. Yeah, know in advance how you want your audience to respond to you in those opening questions. 1 more. Yep. Create that story database. What you've just done is you've done my review. I don't need to review what we covered because you just did it. I love that. Let's talk about the close. I heard a story once, I don't think it's true, but I just love it, about this old man who owned a little pizza parlor. And it was the best pizza parlor in this small town. Everybody loved this pizza parlor. And over the course of time, he said, I'm getting up there in years. I think I'm gonna retire. And so he decides to sell his pizza parlor and he goes away. But as is so true for so many of us and very true for speakers, you can't stay retired long. He got bored. So he decides he wants to open a new pizza parlor, and he opens up another one on the other side of town. Well, the old pizza parlor's doing okay, but the new one is thriving. So this reporter says, I wonder what it is that he knows. I'm gonna go interview him. And so she sets up a meeting to interview this pizza man. And she said, I wanna know your secret. And he said, I'm an old man, so I'll tell you my secret. I put a little extra cheese in the middle of the pizza and a little extra cheese by the crust because the first bite and the last bite are the most important. It's the same with your presentations. The first bite and the last bite are the most important. So if you open with something that's really powerful and then you close with, well, that's all I've got, you just throw, it's like you're one of those people that doesn't eat the crust. The crust is awesome on a good pizza. Eat the crust should be great. Don't throw it away. Do not throw away the close. The close should be just as powerful as the opening, because if it's not, what happens? They don't remember it, and they don't go do anything with what they learned from you. So these are some of the pieces of the close. I typically do a review, and then I take questions. Never, ever take questions at the very end of your presentation. Does anyone know why? Guess who's in control if you take questions at the end? They are, not you. So you could finish with this brilliant close and then go, all right, I have time for 3 questions. By the way, that's the other thing. You never say, does anyone have any questions? You always say, what questions do you have? Or I have time for 2 or 3 questions, something like that. But if you close and then take questions, you will get 3 questions. I don't know how many you'll get, but you'll get a couple of questions that will be brilliant. And then you have time for 1 more and they'll go, why did you wear that purple shirt? You're thinking, this is what I'm closing on? Why I wore this purple shirt? No, you have to own the close. So if you have time for questions, you take them before you get to the close, not after. If you don't have time for questions, you tell folks, I don't have time for questions, but I would be happy to visit with you afterwards. And you never close late. You never run over. That's why I always have a clock off to the side. You can't see it because I'll mess it up if I do. And I have a secret weapon. I got a timekeeper. He's been flashing me all day. He gave me a 60, a 30, because I know if I get going, I'm not gonna know where I am in my time. even if with the clock there. So that's one more touch point for me to make sure I stay on time. You then make sure there's action planning or homework. Here's your homework. At some point in the next 60 days, you are to try one of these techniques. For some of you, that could be in the next 3 days because maybe you're going to get a chance to deliver something while you're here. Try one of these techniques and see if it fits. Remember what I said at the beginning of the day? You're going to be told this is how you should do it. Maybe. Try it on. See if it fits. If it doesn't, take it off and try something different. But try it. If you leave here and don't try any of these things, then we've wasted our time. And I don't want to waste your time, and I certainly don't want to waste mine. Yeah. Yep. Right. Yep. So you, and I'm sorry for interrupting, but I want to make sure we focus, and I love what you just did. You actually just reminded me of something I wanted to talk about. When the meeting planner says to you, we're running long, and it's okay, you can go ahead and go long. You know that, the meeting planner knows that, but guess who doesn't know that? Remember the 4 questions? This is one of the things your audience needs to know. So I would, after my opening, I would say to the audience, now, I don't know if you're aware of this, but we're a little behind. But with your permission, the meeting planner has asked me to cover everything that I had planned to cover. If you feel a need to get up and stretch, feel free. But I hope that there is some value or something like that, because this is a perfect example of the 4 questions. Everybody that needs to know that you're allowed to go long doesn't know. And now you end up being the person. It's not just you that takes the brunt of it. They don't get the learning because they keep looking at their watch going, I thought this was supposed to be ending at 12 and what's going on? Great point, great point. Last question before I go into my close. Yep. Yeah, okay, awesome. So what do you do when something happens in the room that everybody sees? Like, this doesn't work. Or literally, I had a friend who had this happen to her where her slipped down and she's coming on the stage and she just went with it. And then she said, you know, sometimes things just slip. It's okay. Here's the deal, folks. What does your audience already know? They know something just happened. They also know that you know something just happened. If you don't say, in some way refer to it, they think you're clueless. So absolutely, you've got to draw attention to it and then move on. And then you do your real close, which I will do in just a moment. Your real close is the bow. It's what ties it back to the opening story. It's what ties it back to everything else that was supposed to be so critical. It's that last bite of the perfect slice of pizza. And so the last parts I want to talk about are believability. I can do this in 1 minute. If you are not authentic, if you are not truly comfortable with who you are on the platform, your audience will know it. Part of the reason why we spend a lot of time in our business getting good at who we are is because our audiences are smart. They can tell when we don't like who we are. They can tell when we don't know what we're talking about. They can tell when we're faking it. Be authentic, whatever that means for you. Have passion. The name of this whole program today was Passion for the Platform. You better love this. You better love your platform, whatever it is that you're talking about, and you better love your audience. That doesn't mean you have to be high energy like me. You don't have to run around the stage. You just have to show your energy in a way that is totally authentic and real for you. And so I want to take you back. Over the course of the last 12 years, I've spent a lot of time at soccer games and band concerts and choral concerts, watching my nephew grow up and helping him grow. And I loved seeing him thrive? Well, over the course of the years, I did my Grandma Sarah stories, and I would always go around and ask people, who's your Grandma Sarah? Well, for the first time, Jack was getting to see me deliver my workshop. He was in my audience. And we're doing an interactive activity, and people are going around and saying, well, my Grandma Sarah is my cousin Joanne because she always did this. And, well, my Grandma Sarah was my husband who passed away, blah, blah, blah. My Grandma Sarah. And Jack stands up and he says, well, my Grandma Sarah is my Uncle Gary. And for the first time in front of an audience, I lost my composure. I'm starting to cry because I'm realizing that I've done what Grandma Sarah had asked me to do. I am having an impact on this kid. But what I'm also realizing is this kid has had an impact on me. Isn't that true every time we speak? We have an impact on our audience, and they have an impact on us. I never got to meet Cavett Robert, but he had an impact on me like no other. Because the people that he impacted had an influence on me. And I have a responsibility to an influence on the next generation. And so do you. Every single person that you come in contact with, you get to have influence over. From this platform, you have an awesome responsibility to be great and to help them be great. And you have to do just that. So picture it. It is 2017, the beginning of the Cavett Institute. And Chris Clark Epstein and Gary Rifkin, who are the co-chairs of the Cavett Institute, come running up to you and say, oh, thank goodness you're here. One of our speakers wasn't able to be here, and you're on. After you give the speech of your life, and you will, I will be the one to come up to you and say, wow, you speak like a pro. Thank you.